Welcome back to another edition of Revolution Recap. I'm Sean Donahue, joined today by Greg Johnstone. And again, we have another exciting episode with an interview with Teddy Chronopoulos, a Revolution player who was part of the inaugural team back in 1996 and stuck with the team all the way through, midway through 2002, before the team was kind of blown up after Fernando Clavijo was let go and Steve Nicol came in and kind of did a 6-player blockbuster trade. So we'll play that for you shortly. But before we do, Greg, how are you doing? And are you excited that we finally had a weekend with some live soccer with the German Bundesliga coming back?
Yes, and I know I complain about my betting follies all the time here. So I got into Bundesliga. I placed 2 big bets this weekend. Not 2 big bets, but I had high hopes for a 4-0 Bayern Munich win, and I had a 2-0 Borussia Dortmund win. And those were the correct score bets, and I got them flip-flopped. So I'm kind of kicking myself. We did get a 2-0 and a 4-0 victory for the good guys, but unfortunately, as I say, just placed them on the wrong game. So kicking myself a little bit, down 2 units instead of up 20. But hey, glad we have soccer. Glad it's not Belarus. I'm glad it's not Korean baseball. I'm glad it's something that I know something about a little bit.
So close. And it was an interesting weekend because I, for one, was really excited when Giovanni Reyna, the 17-year-old son of Claudio Reyna, who's been impressive for Borussia Dortmund as a substitute, was finally going to make his first start, only to be scratched before the game. And you almost have to wonder if part of that was from the team kind of coming back too soon from this break without enough training. But that was disappointing. But that's enough of talk about German soccer. We got a great podcast for you today about the Revolution. A fantastic interview with Teddy Chronopoulos, who's now coaching youth soccer in developmental academy, but was previously a very good player for the Revolution and a guy that's come up a lot when teams are doing best 11s as defender for the Revolution on those best 11 teams. So excited to talk to him, and we'll play that interview for you now. We're joined today by former New England Revolution defender and midfielder Teddy Chronopoulos, who played for the Revolution in their inaugural season and is now a youth academy director at the Southern California, New Mexico, and Washington state-based Pateadores Soccer Club, and is head coach of some of their developmental academy teams. Teddy, how are you doing in these difficult times?
It's different. You try to find different ways to spend time, obviously a lot with your family. I think you're able to tackle a lot of probably long-term projects you never probably were ever going to get to. And, we're able to stay connected with the kids. I think that's really important for our club, is to maintain that relationship that we've built over the years with these kids in our academy, and just trying to find new ways and to get in touch with them, whether it's virtual training or tactical talk. It seemed to be great. What we've done recently is brought back some old academy players to speak to our younger kids. Frankie Amaya, who was drafted by Cincinnati, last year, a couple of years ago. We've got Cameron Harper, who's at Celtic in Scotland, was with us for 3-4 years. So we're definitely trying to find different ways to keep them occupied. But unfortunately, during this time, it's been tough, I think, for a lot of families and coaches, dads, moms, grandparents. It's been very difficult. But it seems like the worst is by us, hopefully, in the next few weeks, and we can get back onto the field and people can get back to their jobs and start enjoying their lives again.
And we wanted to ask you, before we dive into your career with the Revolution, we want to kind of talk about your role at Pateadores. You kind of briefly talked about your academy, but please tell us about your role and how it got started.
Yeah, so back in 2014, I believe, I've been at Pateadores. Pateadores is a club here in Southern California, Costa Mesa area, Orange County, that's been in existence since 1987. And started here in 2014 as an academy director. Was in charge of, back then, was only 3 teams, I believe, 14, 16s, and 18s. And now it's grown into 10 teams that I'm in charge of, that we have academy teams, but we also have built, if you want to call, kind of reserve teams to those academy teams, so bigger player pools to choose from. But as a club, we're one of the biggest clubs in Southern California. We're over 250 teams across Southern California. boys and girls. So we've got a large base of kids that are a part of our club. And right now I'm the academy director, so I oversee just the academy level kids, but have a footprint in the club direction as well, to model certain agendas that streamline kids, better streamline kids to go in through the academy from the club system, since our club is so big, so that we retain a lot of our kids through our club instead of going out and recruiting. We really do a good job of having kids come through our system.
And right now there's a lot of change going on in the youth programs and youth development. Obviously, MLS has just started their developmental league. I'm curious what your thoughts are about those changes and how it's impacting things for you at Pateadores.
Yeah, we went a different route. When the league came out, they came out really late. When the Development Academy disbanded, we had been in discussions. We kind of knew what was going on, so we had started initial discussions with ECNL. We felt that was a good platform, good structure, good competition for our kids at the time, and still think that way. So a lot of the top 6 DA clubs, non-MLS clubs in Southern California, decided to stick together and hop over to the ECNL, which has been great so far, with the leadership that they've shown. With the MLS league, it's still a little bit of an unknown. We're still waiting to see kind of what the structure is. They've started off by some of the non-MLS clubs have joined across the country, particularly in the Midwest, I believe, and the East Coast. So we're still waiting on the structure. We don't know what the structure is going to look like. Although I do believe there's a pro pathway for kids, and there's also an amateur pathway for kids. And I think that's really important for the kids out there, that they have multiple pathways to choose from. Not necessarily everyone's going to choose the pro pathway and be a pro. We've had 2 kids in our club that chose the college pathway and ended up being pros. Back in the day when MLS started, a lot of kids were coming straight from college. There was no MLS academies or anything like that. So there's been a huge investment in ownership, which has been fantastic to see. Now they just have to tackle, I believe, the whole solidarity payments to youth clubs if necessary, not losing kids to Europe, like they have been in the past, like the Weston McKinneys and of the world that have been part of MLS clubs, and then they end up departing for greener pastures to Europe and them not getting a penny from it. So I think that as soon as that changes, you'll see more kids stay in the U.S.
And I'm going back a little bit too. I'm just kind of curious about it from your end, because this is all kind of new to me, and you're obviously someone who knows a lot more about the youth academy system than I do. But it sounds like you had an option to go into the MLS system or the ECNL, and you went with the ECNL path. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. So when we decided to go ECNL, MLS had not even come out with a proposal. Okay. I think we were all kind of thrown off at the last second, and MLS kind of just said, okay, we're gonna run a league, like right when it was like literally 20 minutes to an hour after the DA disbanded, they came out with an announcement. So everyone was a little bit kind of like taken back, like, oh, okay. But before that, we were actually talking to ECNL because we knew we had heard some rumors that the DA might be disbanding. So we need to try to find out the best alternative for us as a club. I thought that this was the best avenue, best route to take at the time. I still have great relationships with MLS clubs. We've always been in contact. They still want to play us regardless if we're part of the ECNL or not, because they know we give them good competition. So I think over this next year, it's going to be interesting to see how this structure kind of plays out on their part, because I think we all understand that over this next year, at least 6 to 8 months, I think they really concentrated, all the leagues really concentrated on having more regional competition as opposed to getting on a plane and flying across the country during this time. So I think we all kind of agree that, no national travel is probably not going to happen until the spring of 21. So, we'll see how the leagues play out. I think there's definitely different platforms for every kid out there. There's not just one set platform that this is, not good for me, or it is good for me. I think there's, it's good to have choices.
Kind of to jump from the platform you're creating for kids to, go pro and go into college or whatever they want to do now to your own background and how you got into Major League Soccer and becoming a professional. For, background to people that might not know, you obviously came up at a very different time than what's going on now before MLS existed. And you grew up in California. You played soccer at Cal State San Bernardino and then transferred to San Diego State. And then when you left college, you didn't have the option of playing in MLS because it wasn't there. So how did you end up playing in Greece, and what was that experience like?
It was interesting, because back then, there were just kind of youth national teams, never made a youth national team, never made a camp, went the college route like everybody else, and just grinded and worked hard, persevered, and, really wanted to be a pro. But I knew I needed to get more competition at the college level, playing against older kids. So I had a connection over in Greece and went there in 92, I believe, 94, and went on a trial with the local club in Greece called Pateadores in Athens, very well known for selling younger players to the bigger clubs. So went there on a trial and didn't do great. I played as a 10 or as a forward in college, and when you go to Europe, it's a different animal. So back then there was only 5 foreign players were allowed to be on a squad, and I was a foreigner at the time. So in order for me to be rostered on a team, I'd have to get Greek citizenship. So my parents, obviously coming from Greece, I was able to establish Greek citizenship. The one not caveat, but obstacle was when you're Greek citizen, you have to go to the army in Greece. It's mandated for 6 months. So that was an obstacle that, we had to go through, and ended up not having to go to the army. So that was a relief. So ended up staying there for about 2.5 years. And, the coach said, you can stay, but you're not going to play in the midfield. You're going to have to try somewhere else. So he said, can you play outside back? And I said, I'll play anywhere you want me to play. So just started a different craft, playing in center mid and then going to an outside back is definitely different. Did that for 2.5 years and really blossomed into a decent outside back into Greece. And then when the MLS was going to start up in 96, there's a lot of rumors. And at that time I was young. I was 22 years old. I was, wanted to come back home and, try to do everything I could possibly do to get back home and to come back to the league.
And so it seems like you wanted to come back to America, and that was kind of your reasoning. Was it tough to kind of give up what seemed like you were doing pretty successful in Greece at that time?
Yeah, it was tough. It was, I think if I would have stayed, I would have probably maybe played with their national team. I was on the rise. I was a young player that was doing really well, but I wanted to come back and play in the league and be a part of, sort of a pioneer. But when I came back, I was not granted anything like other players were, where they were either allocated to a team or they were guaranteed that they were going to be picked up in the draft. I literally had to go to a tryout at UCI. Over 700 players were there on a trial over a 2-day period. And you can imagine, how many kids or good players fell through the cracks. And I got lucky, I got picked up by the Revolution, lucky at the 5th round. And I wasn't even supposed to be picked up because I didn't have, my Greek club wouldn't release me. So I think MLS ended up paying a transfer fee. I have no idea what it was. It was probably a bag of balls and some corner bags probably, but, I don't know. And next thing you know, I'm sitting at home in February and they said, you've been drafted 5th. And I'm like, New England, I didn't even know where it was, it's like, where's, so it was, definitely like I said before, certain different players take different paths to get to where they want to eventually. Some of it's directed to pro, some of it's college, some of it's amateur academies. Back then you really didn't have, like you said, you really didn't have too many options. You just basically had one, and that was it. So that's kind of how it all happened.
Did you have any indication that the Revolution were interested in you before the draft, and what were your initial thoughts about moving to Foxborough?
No, not at all. There was no talks, because I didn't know anyone. I was absolutely. At first, I played right back in Greece for 2 years, and then I come here, and I remember it was Tim Hankinson was my coach for the little combine, and he said, "Can you play left back?" In the 3-5-2, I think we were playing, and I said, "Yeah, sure, no, I'll play," and I ended up doing really well, and I think it was Frank Stapleton and Ron was the assistant, and I didn't even get a call. I didn't get anything. It was just basically, "Hey, you were drafted." I just looked on the internet and said, "Yeah, you're drafted 5th round," and I'm like, "What?" I had no clue, and I think that year when we got into preseason, there was like 24 inches of snow, so I had no idea where we were at the time, or training at Foxborough back then, the bubble, which I hear now it's like an amazing site stadium. Back then, the bubble was like 50 yards long, I think.
Yeah.
The worst AstroTurf, I think, in the world. But at that time, it was like you were just so overwhelmed and honored to be a part of the league at that point.
What was the experience like being part of a brand new team coming together in a brand new league?
It was interesting. It was fun. It was exciting. It was to be part of a new team in a new city. The Boston fans are unbelievable when it comes to their sports and their passion for the sports. We were so recognizable in the beginning when we said who we were. Everyone wanted to have us do certain events for them, whether it was come and sign autographs at a youth soccer tournament or go downtown and be part of a grand opening of a restaurant, or we were so new and exciting at the time. Everyone wanted us to do things, and so there was a lot of appearances that we had to make, and that was part of the job too. I think that as players we had to promote the game because it was really the second time there was a professional league in the United States, so we had to grow it, and and it was making sure that people knew who we were and come out to the game. And, I think we were averaging over 30,000 people a game. The fans were just amazing. I remember one time we had like an 8-game losing streak, and we came back and there were 60,000 people. I'm like, what the? I mean, it was crazy. It was fun. It was exciting. The ownership, the crafts were unbelievable with me personally. Got to know them really well, and Myra as well, Bob's late wife that passed away. Got to know her really well. I did a lot of appearances for her at the YMCA. She was at the Boys and Girls Club. She ran one, and I did some appearances for her there. So definitely a lot of great memories while I was there during my 7 years.
You joined a team with 2 U.S. national team defenders in Lexi Lawless and Mike Burns. Were they helpful in your development as a player, and was there anyone else who kind of took you under your wing as a newcomer?
Yeah, Lexi it was different with Alexi because at that time I think he was doing some dual stuff with the Olympic team as well, I think that year. And, he was gone a lot. You really didn't see Alexi a lot during the first year I was there. He was always doing appearances. He was obviously the poster, the club, rightfully so. Mike was just a down-to-earth, hardworking, blue-collar, funny friend, colleague, really got to know him really well. I would say Lino Alvarez, I think he was in 99, maybe 2000? Lino Alvarez, when he came from the Dallas Burn, I think. He was very influential.
Yeah, I think it was 99.
Yeah, he was very influential. He had, talk about experience. And he loved the younger kids. He always would try to help the younger generation of kids coming up and trying to teach them the do's and don'ts. So I thought he was very influential. I thought Walter Zenga was very influential, for his short time as a player and then as a player coach. Very knowledgeable in terms of like soccer. His tactical awareness was unbelievable. I thought he was very influential as well. And as far as coaches, you got to look at Thomas Rongen. Was very influential for me as a player. He was my coach when I kind of got my in '96. I didn't play much, but in '97 I really took off, and under his guidance got to play with the national team. So I thought, playing under him taught me the game in a different way, from a detail standpoint. And I thought I really, excelled after '97 is really when my career kind of took off, with the Revs and with the national team.
And you mentioned Mike Burns. I think you called him funny a little while back.
Yeah.
We've gotten word that he was quite the prankster in his playing years. Do you have a favorite Mike Burns prank or story?
You know what, guys? I wish I did. I don't. I think a lot of his pranks were with the national team, not too much for the Revolution. I don't remember, to be honest, anything with Mike. He was always, on the field, very serious and, very competitive. Like I said, blue collar, hard worker. Even with the national team, when I got to Cohen, he was playing, and I got to go in camp with him, and, very similar. But him and Claudio were like would always room together. So Reina, they would always room together. So there was always something going on between the two of them. So it was fun to watch, fun to be a part of. And those are the things I think you miss the most is the camaraderie of the guys in the locker room. I think every professional probably says that. That's what they miss the most.
And I actually want to ask you about another teammate. We talked to Brian Dunseth on Friday, who, well, first off, he wanted us to ask you how many times you shampoo and condition your hair in a single day.
Not as much as he does probably these days.
Well, I was going to say, do you have any Brian Dunseth stories or any dirt you want to air? We're just to be fair and balanced. We want to see if you want to get a shot in on him.
Yeah, I don't, I'm trying to remember kind of so long ago. I mean, I just remember Brian coming in as a cocky center back playing from the Olympics, and he's a captain and coming all in and hair gelled and slicked every time he went to practice, and he would love to hit a 40, 50-yard ball when you were open 10 yards in front of him. So that was kind of like always teased to him. We called him Beckenbauer. He thought he was Beckenbauer. But yeah, Brian and I became pretty good friends, when he came into the Revolution, and tried to, kind of give him the do's and don'ts when he first came in. And I think I saw Brian for the first time maybe at the convention, maybe last year, 2 years ago, and said hello to him, so he's doing really good things with Real Salt Lake and Sirius, and his career is definitely taking a different turn, and then he's done a great job. I love listening to him on the TV when we get a chance to watch.
And I want to also go back to, you mentioned doing all the public appearances, and you got kind of close to Meyer Craft and the Crafts. How involved were they in those first few years?
They were very involved, because they wanted to build it just as much as bad as we did. And they really put a lot of trust into the players to say, hey, this is your game. You guys need to grow it and make it recognizable in the United States. And, it was our job to go out there and promote it and get kids to the games and get their kids' friends to the games. And, they were very influential for me as a person, as a young player coming to New England for the first time, being open arms and in terms of coming out to their YMCA and doing clinics for the kids, going out to, in Boston, there's a lot of closed indoor facilities, which in California, there's hardly any. And in Boston, there's so many of them. And during the wintertime, I got to spend some winters there in Boston, and instead of coming home. So I spent some winters there and did a lot of appearances during that time. And, it's a chance to promote yourself as well, to let people know who you are. And, I was kind of a fan favorite at the time, and then that's from building relationships with people and stopping and saying hello and doing autographs with kids. And, a lot of appearances that we did in the beginning were, for no money. It was just, nowadays I think it's, when you do an appearance, you get a fee or something. Back then it was all pro bono. It was like, listen, you need to go out and promote the game and do your best. And we enjoyed it. It was fun. Now obviously attendance is a little bit different. I don't know why, but the game has changed, and I think people get accustomed to watching certain players, and when they leave, some of them may not be interested anymore. But they've done some good things since I've left. They've done some great things in terms of the stadium and personnel. The people that are there now I know really well as well. So they're definitely on the right track.
The Revs went through coaches pretty quickly in your years with the team. And it started with Frank Stapleton, who obviously had an amazing playing career in England and was a star for the Irish national team.
Yeah.
They had Thomas Rongan, Walter Zinga, Fernando Clavijo. What did you learn from all those guys? And is there anything in particular from them that you take into your coaching now?
Interesting with Frank. Frank always wanted to play with us. He would tape his ankles before practice, and he was like, he wanted to play. He never really didn't coach as much. He was just more of wanted to get out in the field, and he's an unbelievable finisher in and around the box. And, I think with Thomas, like I said before, more detail oriented, everything was structured. You went from one phase to another very quickly. There was no downtime in between sessions or exercises. There was tactical talk. There was video sessions every Tuesday or Monday. Everyone dreaded because he would absolutely kill us in video sessions. And then you had Fernando, who loved to play soccer tennis, who was an unbelievable soccer tennis player. So we'd always play that before training. So his training sessions were a lot different. They were a lot more playing, a lot more, small-sided games. And he would also play as well, because he could still play. He was an unbelievable player. And then Zenga was very tactical, a lot of tactical sessions. I mean, a lot of walkthrough, which I think a lot of the American players didn't really get accustomed to it because they just wanted to play. But I looked at it as a different, light in terms of the tactical part and how he saw it coming from Italy, who was very good at the time. So, again, you took a little bit from each one. And, one thing you do right now with the kids is, with me, is very detailed, very structured, but also you got to give them a little bit of, freedom too. I think the kids are kids. And when you put too much structure and too many restrictions on these kids, they tend to tune out. And I think you can get away with letting them have a lot of freedom, but also coaching within the game and not have to stop it so much. There's a time to stop it and there's a time to let it go and still be able to get your point across as the game flows.
Was it a weird dynamic playing for Walter Zinga, who was, obviously a legendary goalkeeper who was still playing in goal and coaching at that time, especially as a defender?
Yeah, it was tough. It was, I think when he brought in Galderisi, I think it was a lot better because now Galderisi could focus on the attack. He could focus on the defense. He tended to focus on the defense too much, and our attack kind of sputtered because of it. So when Galderisi came back to coach, there was a good balance between the two. But his sense of how to read the game from a goalkeeper position was incredible, right? He played in the World Cup. He's played for some of the top clubs in Europe. So his expertise and his knowledge and the details on, when the ball's in wide areas, what's your body shape like, those little details that we don't really teach a lot with young kids, go really a long way. So I think that one thing I take from him really is the detail in the back. I mean, obviously I played left back, right back. So I was very, attached to him, in terms of like wanting to learn more. So I thought that was an interesting dynamic.
Do you remember Steve Nichols' 2-game tenure in 99 at all? I know he won those 2 games. Or was there any thoughts back then that he could have been a head coach?
You know what? I don't know if Steve came in when I was traded. It's funny because we went to Colorado in 2002. We took a trip to Colorado, and me and Franchino, I remember we were both injured with growing injuries, and we were both went on the flight. and Franchino gets injured in warm-up, and myself, I kind of feel a little tweak, and I'm like, I'm not so sure, but I end up playing. We lose 5-0, I believe, or 4-0 in Colorado. On the flight home, Fernando gets let go, and the next morning I come into the office, I get traded. I was traded with Mamadou Diallo and Andy Williams to the Metro Stars. So I really didn't get to stick around with Steve. I was, unfortunately I didn't get to stick around. I mean, I knew Ralston, got to play a little bit with him, and Twellman a little bit. But I was traded right before all the success.
Well, he also had a 2-game stint in '99 right after Zinga was fired, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think he might have. I don't really remember it, to be honest. It was very short. I don't remember. I might have been injured at the time. I'm not quite sure.
I remember some of your later years of the team. I was covering the Revolution online, and my dad actually was on the sidelines taking pictures, and he would always joke to me that you had the longest last name of the team, and it looked like it barely fit on the jersey, and they had to extend it onto your sleeves. Did you ever get any jokes from the teammates or equipment managers about that?
Oh my gosh! I mean, so many teammates like, "What's going on with your name?" And I mean, back then too, the jerseys guys were like, I mean, they were made out of wool. I think. I mean, they were so heavy. And we had Reebok and Umbro and Athletica, I think, was a brand we had. And These jerseys were so like heavy you couldn't even run. It was like carrying a backpack. And nowadays, you got all the Nikes and Adidas and the world have all these nice jerseys, and now they have nicknames. I probably could have had a nickname back then. Probably made it a lot shorter, but I don't even think they allowed them.
The Revolution made the playoffs for the first time in 1997 and wound up matched up against DC United, who was the first MLS dynasty. What was those playoffs like?
Wow. That was we had a good year that year, too. We think we ended up coming in second place in the division. DC, I've been watching a lot of games that have been on TV lately with DC, and you watch all these, not older players, but older generation, the Echeverries and the Valderramas of the world, and gosh, you watch them and just admire, some of the stuff they did, and the Peter Novaks that were in the league, and Kubic from Chicago, and Cienfuegos. Man, there were some unbelievable players in attacking positions that would do very well, I think, in the league now. But the playoffs were interesting. We had the shootout, I think, back then. I saw some of those online that made me kind of reminisce. They were competitive. It was definitely a lot different than the game is now. The game's a lot faster, obviously, now. But back then, boy, there were some really good players that played in the league that really stood out, and you would pay money to go and watch.
Out of curiosity, were you ever in those shootouts at the end of the game? Did you ever lobby to take part in those?
Yeah, I did. I think I ended up going 3 for 5 maybe in my career. We didn't have a lot of ties. I remember we didn't have a lot of them, but I think everyone was kind of just like not over it, but we were very intrigued. But we were like, gosh, can we just do a tie and both of us get a point? At that time, everyone was just. I think the fans loved it. In the beginning, I think the fans loved it. The players didn't like it as much. That was the kind of the talk around the league at the time.
The Revs in 2001 had a fantastic run in the U.S. Open Cup final. It was the team's first Cup final. Can you talk about that game and what it was like playing in the team's first final?
Yeah, so that was, we actually did pretty well that year. Luckily we had a lot of home games. We didn't have to go away at all until I think the final. And we ended up playing. I had a hamstring injury. I think I played maybe the last 15, 20 minutes of that game. I had a hamstring. I had quarter zone shots because I wanted to play so bad because we played at Cal State Fullerton, so we were here at home in front of family. And that was great. It was a great atmosphere. We think we played the Galaxy, maybe, I think it was.
Yeah.
And we ended up losing, I think, in overtime. In sudden death overtime, I think we ended up losing. So that whole run was a great experience. I don't think we were doing too well in the season. I think Clavijo, was the coach at the time. I don't think we did well during the regular season, but we had a good run in the Open Cup, and I think it's a great tournament. I think you can see it all over the world with the FA Cup, and you have these teams that aren't supposed to win games from lower divisions, and you could just shows you some of the players are just as good as the players that are in the current league, and they want to show. They want to show well. Those games are very competitive, and the MLS clubs tend to rest players. They tend to get playing time for their younger kids during those times. So it's a great tournament, and it's fun to watch. I continue to watch it till today. But during that time, it was definitely exciting because you had something to play for. And when you always have something to play for, everything seems to be more exciting.
And I want to go back to the trade in May 2002, which saw you going to the Metro Stars as part of that 6-player deal. Were you blindsided by that? Did you have any indication that that might be coming?
Totally blindsided. I was injured, coming off a groin injury, like I said, from Colorado. I came in to get therapy the next day, and I could see, I think it was Ryan was our equipment manager. I could see a look on his face, and I'm like, dude, what's going on? He's like, coach wants to see you. And I'm like, oh, geez. I went in there. I believe Todd was the general manager at the time. I had heard Clavillo had got let go, and Stevie Nickel was in there and said, listen, Teddy, we have to make a change. And unfortunately, you're a part of this trade. We don't want to trade you, but the Metro Stars basically said, give us an ultimatum. And it said, if you're not included in the trade won't go through. Because at first it was just going to be Mamadou Diallo and Andy Williams, they told me. And they said that I was a part of the trade as well. They wanted me to be a part of the trade as well. And if I wasn't included, there wouldn't be a change. And I understand why they did it. There needed to be a change in the locker room. The locker room was not good at the time. There was a lot of disruption, and they felt, they needed to make a change, which I agree with. And, but unfortunately that's part of the league as well. You really don't have a say, when you're traded. So I ended up going to the Metro Stars and had a very good season, actually. We were in first place for a while, and then I think we ended up playing our last game was against the Revolution. We had to win to get in the playoffs, and we didn't get in. And we had beaten the Revolution 2 out of 3 times when I was with the Metro Stars. And, it was definitely hard at the time, but that's part of a, professional career. You got to roll with the punches and, go where, you're desired. And, unfortunately, after my year in the Metro Stars, Bob Bradley came in and kind of made some changes, brought me into his office and said, listen, I'd love to have you, but I need you to take a pay cut. And I said I wasn't willing to take one. So he said, unfortunately, I'm going to have to release you if that's not the case. So that's kind of how I ended up going to the Charleston Battery after that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like back then, and even to a lesser extent now, if you had the MLS team had your rights and you weren't happy with the contract option, you didn't really have an option but to go to another league, right? Is that, and that's why you ended up with the Battery.
Yeah, you're right. They had my option, and there were other clubs that were interested after the year was over, but not at the salary I desired. So I felt it was best just to, had a friend down in the Battery that I called and went down there and did really well, won a championship in the first year back in the A-League days. So, that was fun and great experience. And then you had a trial with the Galaxy the following, right after that season was over. I think Ziggy Smith was the coach and came in and did really well. And they wanted to sign me, but Ziggy's like, I can't pay you. I got to pay you minimum wage. I can't pay you what you want. And minimum wage at the time, guys, was what, $28,000 or something like that. $36,000 was the minimum. I'm like, I can't do this. I gotta, so that's when I went back to the Battery, played another couple of years, and then really got into coaching, within my last 2 years down there.
Just quickly jumping back to the Revolution, I'm sure you've seen it. A lot of teams are been doing all-time best 11s to celebrate the league's 25th season. For the Revs, it seems like your era has been kind of ignored. Joe Max Moore has made a lot of those teams, and we've seen you get a lot of votes actually. Who are some of the other guys from your time with the team that you think people are overlooking when they're kind of putting together an all-time best Revolution team?
Wow, man, Francis Okaro was good. What a center back. He was rock solid. And he came from nowhere. He wasn't even on a team when we picked him up. He was solid. Obviously, Joe Max was a very good player. Leonel Alvarez, when he came, he was a very good player. Alberto Nevada, the first year, I think, very good player. I think Galderisi came later on, maybe for a year. But during the beginning, like the 96, 97, gosh, you look at some of those guys, and, I mean, there were some good players with Francis and, like I said, Alberto Nevada, Joe Max. Actually, Joe Max lives here, close by me now. But some good players back then that played, and then I got a chance to train with Taylor and Stevie. I got to play against Ralston a lot. Those two were exceptional. I never got to play against Shari, but I know Shari really well. We've done some coaching stuff together, so I've got to know him pretty well. Good guy. I can see why they got picked. Those guys have carried on and done some really good things. I know Matt Reese really well. Matt and I were with the national team staff a few times, so got to know Matt really well. He's in Southern California. So definitely, Joey Franchinos of the world, who you'd love to have on your team, but hate to play against him. He was very good. So there's a lot of good players that ended up playing with.
Seems like you keep in touch with a good amount of the guys you used to play with and against, right, from those early teams? Yeah,
for sure. I did some stuff for MLS, some PME stuff, where you go in and you evaluate games and referees, and you got to see Ralston a couple of years ago. I hadn't seen in a while. Saw Taylor Twellman a couple of years ago. Brian Dunseth, stay in touch with. I haven't seen Jay Heaps too much. I, sent him a congratulating text when he got the job years ago. The Leo Collins, saw him, definitely try to stay in touch with guys. You tend to lose touch sometimes when they kind of are out there doing their own thing, their own coaching and their own lives. And some guys are not even in coaching. They're just, have regular jobs, which is great to stay in touch with them as well. You definitely try to stay in touch with those guys and talk about old times.
And you ended your career playing indoor soccer with the Chicago Storm. I'm curious what it was like playing indoor soccer and playing for that team.
It's like playing hockey on tennis shoes. It was, it was Frankie Klopas is a good friend. He called me up and I was in Charleston, just sitting down, and he's like, "Hey, you want to come play in Chicago?" And I'm like, "What?" Like, I'm going to run a new Chicago team and want you to be a part of it. You'll be our first like signing. And I'm like, sure, why not? Obviously back then with the A-League was only 6 months out of the year. So you had to kind of supplement your income the other 6 months. So, got to go to Chicago. It's probably during the worst months you want to go to Chicago, in the winter months. But definitely, Frankie took me in and was very appreciative of that, and still stay in touch with him as well. And, good brand of football, to be honest, like some good soccer, some great soccer players that I never even heard of, that were on the team, and definitely different. I think I shattered my cheekbone in one game with an elbow. I mean, it's a physical game, but definitely, tactical, technical. You got to be good in tight spaces. It definitely sharpens your game up in a different way. But it does take a toll on your body, obviously, because you're basically playing on concrete with AstroTurf placed over it. It's not the good turf you see now, that guys play on. Definitely not.
And it reminds me of, we talked to Henry Kessler, who's a rookie on the Revolution, who he made his debut in Olympic Stadium in Montreal, the old Expos Stadium.
Oh.
And he said playing on that surface was like playing on a basketball court. So that's kind of the image that I have right now playing indoor soccer.
Oh, we would train on some good turf. Like Frankie Klopas had a nice facility, trained on a nice field turf. And I'm like, just what it's like during the, games was like, heck, and it literally was like he's describing. It's just like concrete in the old AstroTurf, and they lay it over. It was fun. It was definitely exciting. We'd get 4,000 or 5,000 fans a game, and, it was definitely different. And then after that, you head back to outdoor, because there's really not much of a break, after you're done. So that was interesting. Back then, that's how guys kind of supplemented their income, was to kind of do both at the time.
Yeah. Do you still follow the Revolution at all?
I do. I know Dave Vanderberg really well. Did some camps with him. Obviously, Bruce, that I've known and admired over the years. And Richie Williams, I know well. I know Kurt Onalfo. I've coached against his son out here in California. So I know all those guys, and, they've definitely been keeping track. I mean, the new facility is unbelievable that I see it online. I visited Foxborough maybe 4 years ago when Roma was in town. Mm-hmm. We have a affiliation with AS Roma with our club, and they have affiliations across the country, and one of them is us. So we go there wherever their preseason was in California. We would go there for a week, and they would train our boys. So then we would be able to see them play their games. So I ended up going back to Foxborough for the first time, and I'm looking at all these restaurants and all this stuff. I'm like, this used to be a parking lot. Yeah. I mean, it was just like, I had to park so far away. The parking lot was across the street. And I'm like, I've never even been here before. So it was interesting to see. I played in the new stadium once when they first built it. I think it was in 2002 when they played the first game.
Back when it was CMGI Stadium.
Yeah, I think it might have been a European game. Might have been the first game I ever played at the stadium. So was able to see that, but seeing it now, I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, the academy facility I hear is unbelievable. Definitely the Crafts are definitely investing a lot more now, I've heard, over the last couple of years. But again, if it wasn't for the Crafts and the Hunts and the Anschults of the world, there would be no league. Let's be honest. Back in, when it first started.
And you mentioned their investment recently. A lot of people are bummed about the current stoppage in play because a lot of people had high hopes for the 2020 Revolution. What are your thoughts on the current team and the current roster?
I haven't really kept too much. I was watching them last year. I kept in touch with them a lot. I didn't see any new guys they picked up in the off season, any foreign, players or anything like that. I know obviously they're college kids they picked up, but I don't think they made a lot of changes as far as I know.
No.
So the only change they really made was, with their academy. I know Brian Scales really well. Brian's the academy director, so I, talked to him a lot. We actually played the Revolution in December. We ended up losing, I think, 2-0, 3-0 my club. We played the Revolution a few times in the academy, so we always kind of stay in touch. But I think the biggest thing that the improvement they made in the offseason was just the facility alone, I believe. The $30 million they spent on, brand new academy facility and for the first team, for the academy. I think they're going to do a League One team next year, I think they talked about.
Yeah.
Instead of doing their 19s, U19 academy, they're going to have a League One, which makes total sense. I mean, if your younger kids are going to be the future of your club, why have a 19s? Your 19s should be playing against men. And I think that them making that move is smart, and it'll be beneficial for them in the long run.
It seems like you jumped right from playing into coaching. Did you always know you wanted to, become a coach after soccer? You mentioned other guys that, kind of left soccer and did other things after their careers were over.
Yeah, I don't think you really don't know you're going to be a coach until kind of your career starts winding down. You're like, gosh, what am I going to do? But I've always had, kind of that innate ability to stay connected with kids and really enjoy the teaching aspect of the game and the details. And I think that's what I'm really good at. So I think that's always been an aspiration of mine. So I started taking my badge, my B license when I was still with the Metro Stars. We were able to, I think it was Tab Ramos and Marcelo. We got a bunch of guys together and said, who wants to get their license? And they came to us and did the license, which they never do. And I think it was Jay Hoffman came out and did our license, and we were all clueless. We had no idea what he was saying and the terminology. We were like, it was like a foreign language to all of us. So I think we really appreciated the detail that went into being a coach. Because as a player, you come into the locker room, you go out to training, you go in the gym, you come, you do some extra stuff afterwards, and you go home. As a coach, it's 24/7. I think you're planning sessions and you're doing certain things with the kids, and it's definitely a different role for sure. But definitely enjoy it. enjoying being around the kids, enjoying them getting to the next level, enjoying being part of the process, and them to lean on your shoulder and say, hey, what did you do in this, in this instance? I think you have a bigger influence on this younger generation that you really know.
And you were involved briefly with Chivas USA and their academy. Could you talk at all about that organization? It seems like they fell apart and didn't necessarily have the most functional operation in MLS.
Yeah, I was Greg Vanny and Robin Frazier were good friends, and when Robin got the job at Chivas, they had called me and said, "Hey, would you be wanting to come and do some stuff with us with the academy?" We talked, we sat down, and everything was great in the beginning. I think everything was, I was part of the first team training sessions, being able to watch that and learn from them and how they wanted the academy to play. And, I think the first year was very successful. And then, when ownership got involved, and when ownership gets involved and there's financial obstacles that are preventing you from being successful, that always seems, it's not a good recipe. And unfortunately that's what happened. And, we all kind of went our separate ways. And if you look at the Greg Vannys of the world now, and Robin, they go to Toronto and they've been very successful. One of the most successful clubs probably in MLS. So, I think that they just need a little more time where they're at, and they weren't allotted that time as promised. So I think just things kind of fell apart after that.
Do you ever see yourself coaching in MLS as a head coach or an assistant coach?
I really don't. I enjoy what I do with the youth. I enjoy molding young players and preparing them for the next level. I don't know how well I would do with the older guys and the egos, and I don't know how well I would do with that. And to be a part of first team training and to be involved, I enjoy, as I was with Chivas. I really enjoyed that aspect. But I think being part of a young person's life and career, and how you mold them and guide them in the direction, gives me more satisfaction to help the younger kids and to kind of give them the ins and outs of what to expect, and when you get to college, or what to expect when you get to pro. And it's hard to get there. It's even harder to stay. And I think with Frankie Amaya, who's a young player that's been with us I coached for 4 years, and to watch him, he's 5'5". He's never played for a youth national team until the second half of his senior year. He ends up going to UCLA for 3 months, and then all of a sudden he's a pro. So his life just did a complete 180 in 12 months. So I was able to help him and to let him know, hey, this is what's going to happen. Keep your head on straight, and continue to work hard, and good things will happen, and good things did.
And before I let you go, because I think we've kept you longer than we were planning to, what would you say was your...
No.
Oh, no, we really appreciate it, Ted. What would you say
fun.
was your best experience in soccer so far?
Wow, there's so many. I think coaching. I think giving back. I really go back to that. And playing was obviously a different experience. I think that not a lot of people will ever experience. And being part of a group of guys that has one common goal, and I think that obviously is an experience in itself. But to be able to teach young kids and at a younger age, and get them to really concentrate on the details of your technical ability is so important at the younger ages. And I really enjoy that piece of, my life right now is be able to give back to maybe that I didn't have when I was a young kid. Everything I did was with my father, which was fantastic. But now, these kids, it's able to have, role models for these kids to really pursue something. Because when you ask every kid, what do you want to do? Is, I want to be a pro soccer player. Well, out of all the youth kids in the academy, it's like 1% end up being pro soccer players. So what happens to the other 99%? So that's where I really think that my role with these kids has definitely grown, is to kind of find ways to get there, but they may have to take a different path. And a lot of these kids don't understand that. They want to just go straight to the top, and they don't understand what it really takes to get there. And it's really sitting down with them and really giving them an individual plan and really mapping out, hey, this is what, you need to be doing on a daily basis if you want to get here. So I think that's probably my best experience.
Ted, we really appreciate your time, and thanks a lot for joining us.
No problem.
And that was Revolution great Teddy Chronopoulos, who, again, was part of the team from 1996 through 2002, and now is doing a lot of coaching. Fantastic to have him on the show. I think we've got another former player coming up, hopefully, for the next episode that we'll have later on in the week or early next week. But great interview from Teddy Chronopoulos. And before I wrap things up, Greg, do you want to tell people where they can find us on social media?
Yes, please follow us at Revolution Recap, and you can also like our Facebook page, Revolution Recap. And please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. They're always greatly appreciated.
And thanks again to everyone for listening. You can follow me at Sean L. Donahue, and we'll have another podcast again for you soon, hopefully with another former Revolution player with some interesting insight into the Revs of the years past.